and welcome to Getting to Know ACS with Tracy
and Jasmine.
So today, well, I'm not just going to say today, the month of October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, so we're going to talk about bringing awareness to domestic violence. And I'm going to have Jasmine introduce our guest today.
So this is Eduardo Poblano.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Yes.
Because I'm having problems speaking today. Anyway, so thank you for joining us, Ed. And what I'd like to do is have you just kind of give us a little bit of your background and then tell us about October being Domestic Violence Awareness.
Of course, and thank you again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh.
As far as my experience before coming to the Family Advocacy Program, I worked as a court-appointed special advocate with children in foster care. I've worked as a child care specialist with children who are in emergency shelters, and before that, or I should say after that, I worked with Child Protective Services.
Oh, okay.
As an investigator and a conservatorship worker, and now I've been here for just exactly a year with the Family Advocacy Program and with the Domestic Violence Program, and I absolutely love it.
Okay, so welcome, and
yes,
congratulations on making it a whole year.
Yes.
That is an accomplishment.
So now you all are stuck with me.
I know, it's like, hey. So, as I said, October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. So can you tell us a little bit about Domestic Violence Awareness Month? What goes on?
Definitely. I think any of these awareness months that come up, it's to really get people educated and have those uncomfortable conversations. I say uncomfortable because we might be victims of domestic violence. We might know someone who's a victim of domestic violence, and we may not know how to get out of that situation, how to address that situation, or even more importantly, how to identify it. So I think that's the main thing that we want to do in October, is to get people thinking, to give them knowledge, because to me, knowledge is power.
Right.
And when you can spread that power within yourself and with others in the community, then we can get people the resources and the help that they need, because it's definitely a scary situation to, I think in any situation, reach out for help.
Right.
So we really just want to empower people to make the change within themselves and help people make the change too.
I think this is actually a perfect time because of that issue that just happened with the TikToker.
Oh, definitely. I'm sure.
And people are just
I'm lost.
So basically, the TikToker went on a trip with her boyfriend.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I see so many comments of people like, well, she chose to go. She chose to be there. So, like, the awareness will help. Like, sometimes it's not that easy.
Right.
You know?
I agree. I think that stigma just holds where it's almost as if, like, if you're staying there, it's because you like it, or it's okay, or it can't be that horrible, because if you really wanted to leave, you would leave. But I think we really need to look at how complicated relationships are. And I think anyone who's been in a relationship knows that it's not always easy to leave.
Right.
If there's no domestic violence. So can you just imagine when there's domestic violence, some financial dependence, it gets very sticky, and it's not always.
Right. And so I'm glad you brought that up, Jasmine. And Eduardo, can you kind of elaborate on, like, what that dynamic is, when someone can't, is having a difficulty leaving that situation, kind of give us a insight on what goes on, why it's kind of difficult to leave those situations.
So the difficulty comes from how complex it is. If y'all are ever interested, you can look up what's called the power and control wheel. Just Google it. And it's essentially a wheel, and it just kind of shows all the different reasons that can kind of pull you into that relationship. Let's say, for example, one is financial dependence. If you do not work and your spouse is the primary financial
provider.
I was like, gainer? Is that a word?
Like,
I had to process that.
It's like, okay, what is it?
And that's okay. That's what I always remind people too. I mean, that's okay if just one person works in the relationship and is bringing in the finances. However, that doesn't mean that you should be in the dark about everything.
Right.
And so that's where you have to have those uncomfortable conversations with your partner and say, well, I should have access to the bank account too. I should have a debit card to this bank account as well.
Right.
Because although you may not be out in the workforce, you're definitely maintaining a household. And especially here with our military, you're a huge source of support for them.
Exactly.
So again, I think it's just all about communication. And you have to be able to communicate about these things, really express your feelings. And because if you don't, then you're going to end up just in a situation where you kind of don't know how to get out of it, or you're maybe scared to talk about it.
Right. Because if I don't have access to the finances, if I don't know where any of the money is, then when I go to try to leave, I don't have the funds to leave, or it's like if I'm trying to leave, how am I going to support myself, or whatever the case may be? Is that often?
Exactly, and that's super stressful. I'm sure you can imagine how stressful that would be just thinking about it for yourself, but then if you maybe throw in somebody who might be pregnant or has a child or two or more, then it gets even more complicated, because you think, well, how can I do it? And some people are lucky enough that they do have very strong support networks to where they have a family member that they can go with.
Right.
But in all reality, sometimes we're not willing to go with family, or family is not willing or able to take us.
Right. And that's a big thing, not being able, because, everybody, like you said, everybody doesn't have that family dynamic where, hey, I can go home and my family's going to take care of me. Some people are like, no, you can't come back. You left, so guess what? You get to stay out there and kind of.
Or culture too, right? Like, no, that's your spouse. You need to stay with them through everything. And it's like,
Definitely. And it's a good thing that you mentioned that, because sometimes it's not just a boyfriend or a girlfriend that you're leaving, it's a husband or a wife. So they feel like, well, if I'm married, I took certain vows, I made a commitment to you. And so that's where it gets a little tricky, because you have to think, although you took vows and you made a commitment to somebody, you still have to watch out for yourself.
Exactly.
There's still a certain level of dignity and respect that you are owed at all times.
Right. And then you have that, not only with that, but psychologically, where that abuser is making this person feel like you can't take, you have to depend on me. It's that control, like you said, that power and control wheel.
Yes, and sometimes the abuser can kind of see if somebody is vulnerable or not, and then so they just kind of make sure to exploit that. And so if there may be someone who is a little bit more meek, I see a lot of young people that don't even have a driver's license. So now they kind of have to stay at home all day, and they're just kind of happy that the bills are paid and there's a roof over their head. And so it makes the abuser more likely to get away with things.
Yes.
And so that's why I always remind people, your power is in your independence. It does not matter if you're employed or not. You should have power within your relationship too, and there shouldn't be so much codependence on each other.
Right. So that's interesting that you bring that up, that the power is in their independence. But a lot of people don't realize that, because maybe they came from a household where that was the norm, where, maybe they're coming from an abusive household where they saw their parents be in an abusive relationship, and now that becomes their norm, and they don't see anything wrong with how their relationship is with their partner.
Most definitely. That just even goes back to how we all deal with trauma. Sometimes we're going to grow up in certain situations, and we might want to do better, or we might kind of follow down that path. It might just be normal to us. There's really no right or wrong answer there.
Right.
But that's definitely things that we have to talk to anyone that we encounter as victim advocates, is kind of get a little history check on them. How did they grow up, sort of thing? What are their perspectives on a relationship? One thing I always ask too is, what does a healthy relationship look like to you? Because that answer is not going to be the same for every person. A healthy relationship to one person, maybe I'm supporting my husband or wife and they're happy, and as long as they're happy, my happiness comes second. As opposed to another person who might say, this is 50-50. If you're going to be happy, I need to be happy. We need to be on the same page, sort of thing.
Right. So when we're talking about domestic violence and you're talking about bringing awareness, what kind of awareness, what are some of the things that people need to be aware of when it comes to domestic violence?
I think the biggest thing to be aware of is the resources.
Yes.
Because at some point in your life or in your relationship, you might need that resource. You might even just be a little curious about that resource. So the biggest thing I always push to people is hotlines. We do have a hotline here at Fort Bliss. And if for any reason you can't remember that, I always just tell someone, Google domestic violence. If you Google those two words, the first thing you'll get is the National Domestic Violence Hotline.
Okay.
And from that website, you can call somebody, you can chat with somebody on that website, or you can even text message.
Oh,
and
okay.
So it can really I think that's a really good place to start, because it sort of breaks the ice and you start talking to somebody about something that you maybe have never mentioned to anyone, something that you might be really scared to share.
Right.
And usually if you're calling either that hotline or our hotline, we're full of resources. And if you have a question, we'll be able to tell you where to go, how you can kind of get that figured out. And if not, then we'll definitely be able to find the answer within some time.
Okay. And shame on me. Do we have that hotline number?
We sure do. It's 915-269-2013.
Okay. So.
And that is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yes.
365 days a year.
365, 366 on a leap year.
Okay.
Every day.
Okay, I'm glad because that leap year, I might need help February 29th.
There you go.
And I'm not getting it. So I'm glad you mentioned that, though. So we need to be aware that everybody's situation is going to be different. Domestic
Definitely.
violence. One of the things I think a misnomer that a lot of people have is that when you're talking about domestic violence, that it is always a physical type of violence.
Yeah.
And you already mentioned financial, so it's not always physical.
Of course not. I just think that kind of like in the media and when we talk to people, that's the main image we have of domestic violence is, somebody getting hit. And I think another image we have is a male being aggressor and a female being a victim.
Yes, that was going to be my next
Mm-hmm.
question.
Which is not,
Yes.
which is definitely not the case, especially now you can be in a relationship with a male or a female, you can be gay or straight, bisexual, anything like that. Or even if you're in a heterosexual relationship, the female can be the aggressor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's not unheard of. It's not something that does not happen.
Right, because I know, sometimes from my experience when I used to do domestic violence briefings, and I would have males who would share that they had been in abusive relationships. And it wasn't that they couldn't protect themselves, but they did not want to become the abusers. So it's like instead of it being turned around that I'm the abuser, I'm just going to go ahead and take it that this weaker spouse or whatever the case may be is abusing me.
Of course. And I think there's just also that stigma within society is, as men, it would almost be, not that it is, but it's looked at as how embarrassing your wife is beating you up or
Exactly.
how hard can she
Yeah.
hit you sort of thing. But honestly, I mean, anybody can get physical, anybody can get violent, and anybody can make you feel fearful regardless of if they're taller or shorter than you or a different gender.
And
Exactly.
then I think, so from the psychological point, it seems like they kind of like mold them in the beginning for men and then or for anybody, but they don't realize until they say it out loud. And I think because they keep it in a lot of the times to themselves, they don't realize that it is until they say it. And then somebody like makes a face like, you did what?
Yeah.
And then they're just like, oh, wait a minute. Like, this is bad. And I think that's the thing is because they keep it more so men do inside, where women, we have like friends that we can talk to,
True.
so,
very true.
and a lot of guys are not going to be as comfortable going to their friends saying, hey, like my spouse is making me do this as openly as women.
Exactly.
I agree 100%. And I think that goes back to why this awareness month is so important
Yes.
because if, for the other 11 months of the year, you're really not talking about domestic violence, you're just kind of internalizing that, thinking of ways that maybe you can, things that you could do to like maybe for it to go away or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But this month I hope would just really reach people and have them start thinking and really in their head start thinking maybe like, well, maybe this is domestic violence. Maybe this does fit the definition. Let me
Right.
Google domestic violence and kind of see what it comes up there.
And then, and if, maybe I don't want to Google it, but that's where we come in at ACS. If they're wanting resources about domestic violence, or resources about how to leave a situation, can they come to ACS and speak with someone in the family advocacy program?
Most definitely. So if you don't remember the phone number or you're kind of too scared to call the hotline or anything like that, because just a note on that, everything that's shared is confidential.
Right.
The only thing I would ever have to report is if there's any indication of like a child being abused or anything like that, I would have to report that.
Right.
But aside from that, I mean, you can tell me your whole life story and I'm not going to tell anyone else about it. I'm not going to take any action on it unless you want to.
Right.
But at the ACS building, we are open Monday through Friday from 7:30 to 4:30, and they can always come in as a walk-in. There'll always be a victim advocate there that they can talk to. And again, what I love about our services is they're completely confidential and they're voluntary.
Right.
So if you come in and you just kind of want to share your situation with us, we can give you some feedback. We kind of have like two main jobs. It's information and referral.
Right.
And the other one is crisis intervention.
Okay.
Crisis intervention is just we're there to comfort you, to help you find like direction to take the next step.
Right.
And at the end of that session, you might say, you know what, I think I'm okay. I think I can handle it from here, and you're completely free to do that. And you can always come back later if you need to.
Right.
Or if you want to make a report with us and obtain services and whatnot, then we can do that too. I think that's what I love about this program is it really gives the power back.
Okay. And I like how you put
Oh,
that, giving
yeah.
the power back to that victim. And, you know, and I can't stress enough that anybody can be a victim. And as you stated, it doesn't matter what type of relationship you're in, whether it's a heterosexual relationship or a same-sex relationship. There's anytime somebody can be an aggressor and,
Definitely.
you know, and take advantage of what they consider a weakness probably in that person who they're abusing. But having the services at ACS, you know, and even if they just want to come in and get information, you know, it's just like, okay, or maybe they're seeking help. Maybe I need a class, you know, on communication, or maybe I need a class on anger management or something like that. And sometimes, even with the anger management, I may not be the person that's angry, but just by going to that class, I can kind of see some of the telltale signs that I may be dealing with somebody who has an anger issue.
Most definitely. You would get to learn maybe what are like certain triggers. You would get to know how it can look in different situations with different people.
Right.
I think, again, being able to come out to us, I know it takes a lot of courage and it can be very scary sometimes, but I really push the voluntary nature of our program and just how much information we can give you. That way you feel empowered to make whatever choice it is that you want to make at that point in your life.
Yeah.
So is there, can you give us like certain things to look for, like in the dating stage more so? Like, just like what can help you identify that you're either in that situation or maybe going towards that situation?
Sure, definitely. Like, I think financially, one thing that I've noticed with relationships is when a new partner or a potential partner that you might meet is a little too quick to want to maybe move you into their home or their apartment or take over your bills. Let me pay this for you. Let me pay that for you. As enticing as that might seem.
It's like, ooh, I got somebody to pay my bills.
Yes, please.
I mean, I don't know if I could say no to that.
I know, it's kind of hard.
That's a good one.
Agreed. But, you know, even if somebody's paying my car, that doesn't mean they get to tell me when to use my car. You know, that's what you have to understand is if you're offering to pay my car payment, fantastic. But that doesn't mean you control me on my car.
Right.
If you're paying the rent and you're putting the roof over my head, that doesn't mean you tell me exactly when I need to be home and when I need to be back. And it's not a cage either.
Right.
So I think a really big red flag to me would be if you can't have those sort of conversations with that partner, or if they get upset easily. That's a huge one too, is anger. I mean, I know we all have our emotions.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, but some people have a lot of anger or they cannot control that anger.
Right.
That's going to be an obstacle that you need to decide if you're going to help them deal with or not, because life is crazy. We all know it.
Right. It is.
You know, there's stressors every day. And so if they're in a very stressful environment and if they don't know how to control their anger, you're more than likely going to feel the brunt of that.
Right. And so, you know, as you were saying with the whole trigger thing, it's kind of like, you know what, I just lost my thought.
It's a lot of thoughts on the
Right,
table.
I know,
yeah.
it's like, okay, where's my paper at, Jasmine?
I know. But there was one thing when I started working here, because obviously I knew bare minimum about domestic violence. I knew, like, if you hit so-and-so, that's domestic violence. But I was in a brief when Miss Tracy was giving the briefings, and she was talking about pets. And I was just like, and she's like, yeah, they can, like, hurt your pet or threaten to hurt your pet. And I was like, if somebody threatened to hurt my dog, I don't think I would leave. I would be like, oh my God, no, like, I'll take whatever you need me to take in order for my dog to be safe. And I never thought about that. And I was like, that's crazy to the extreme of, well, it's not extreme, but how far it can go and us being so unaware.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I think I mean, they're technically keeping you like kind of like emotionally hostage.
Yeah.
Yes.
And, you know, I'd even seen, I have this app on my phone, Nextdoor, with all the neighbors
Oh, yeah.
on that.
Yes.
I'm always looking at lost pets. But I thought about it because a man said that he had a service dog for his PTSD. Him and his girlfriend got in a fight and she let the dog out. And so he's looking for his dog now. I'm there crying over the post, but I'm thinking how horrible. And
that's a form of emotional abuse, because
definitely
here this gentleman needs his dog, and so how do I get you? I'm getting ready to let your dog run away.
Heartbreaking.
I know. I like every time just.
It's like, oh my gosh, you know, and that's a terrible thing. And it's all about control. It's all about making that person feel less than, It's like, I'm the one that's running this show, and you're going to do what I want you to do, or these are going to be the consequences
Oh, definitely.
of that. So I think it's awesome that, we dedicate this month to domestic awareness, but we need to make sure, like you said, there's 11 other months out of the year where it's not being talked about. And I think one of the things that you said that's important is that communication.
Yeah.
And Jasmine, as you mentioned, what are some of the signs as we're dating someone? What are those red flags that we can look for? If you can't communicate with someone, that's probably a big red flag. It's like they're not open to hearing what you're saying, or they're constantly shutting you down.
I would agree. That's probably the biggest red flag, because that communication is going to take you throughout the whole lifespan of that relationship. And really a lot of comfort too. You should feel comfortable. That's one thing I've noticed too in some relationships, is they don't feel comfortable telling them how they feel. They don't feel comfortable telling their spouse or boyfriend or girlfriend that they do something that they don't like.
Right.
And you need to have that comfort.
And that's good, because like one of the classes that we teach, it does come up in that class. And one of the things that we say that's a healthy relationship is that you have to have a level of comfort or of being emotionally vulnerable with your partner. And that emotional vulnerability comes to, like you said, expressing my emotion, letting you know when something that you're doing is bothering me, or letting you know how I feel. If you don't have that, then you might want to check to see if this is really the relationship that you want to be in, or the relationship that's best for you. Because a lot of times we want to be in a relationship with someone, and we overlook all those little signs. Like you said, I'm gonna put all this gas in your car, but guess what? I'm gonna keep track of where you're going.
That's not gonna work with me.
Because I need to be able to go where I want to go. But it's those little things, like you said, it's endearing to us. Because, someone offering to pay your bill.
Yes, please.
It's like, do you want all of them?
Can you cover the insurance too?
I know. Can I get all of that? But then what is the price that you pay for those? And that's a way of getting them under your control, to have that person under your thumb.
And I think something you both have mentioned is those red flags, but sometimes that we internalize these things and we're going to say, oh, it's okay. So we really need to have a support network of at least one friend, one family member, but hopefully more, because I think those are also the best people to give us an outside perspective.
Yes.
To let us know, hey, you guys look very happy, but it seems like you have to stay with him or her throughout this whole family function, and they don't let you leave, and you have to.
I got to be right under them.
So,
or if you start talking, I'm coming over there to see what you're talking about.
Speaking of that, because we've mainly talked about the victims. However, how can those around the victim better help the victim instead? Because we know we don't want judgmental, right? Like, girl, why do you let him do that to you like that? Like, don't do that in front of him, obviously.
Or like, do.
Right, yeah. Like, we can't.
Hit on you.
Yeah, like, right. But how can they be supportive in the best way for the victim?
Good question.
I think that is an awesome question. I think it would really fall into two aspects. One is the privacy. You do not, like you all have mentioned, we laugh about it, but there would be maybe some family members that would maybe call them out and say, why do you always have to, sit next to him? That's not going to get you anywhere. Yeah. And more than likely, that's just going to upset the aggressor.
Right.
So I think you have to really make sure that you're in a private situation so that the aggressor can't intervene, and then so the potential victim or the victim can really feel more comfortable sharing information with you.
Yes.
The other thing is, I think you want to approach it more like with an inquisitive tone. You don't really want to start saying, I see this and I think it means this. Instead, maybe ask, well, how's your relationship been going with them? How do you feel about it?
Yeah.
You want to really start figuring out how they feel about it, because you want to gauge if they're aware of it or if they're completely unaware with it. Because if they're aware of it, then maybe you can have a more concrete conversation on if they want to get out and how they want to get out. If they're not aware of it, then that's a whole different tone you need to take. You need to maybe find a way how to convey to them the situation that they're not aware of.
Yeah,
right.
I like that. I never thought about that. Good question,
Thanks.
Jasmine.
I am on a roll today.
I know.
Yeah.
Hey, when I'm down, hey, Jasmine comes in.
Yeah. And it's crazy because, like, I know for some people they like to support their friend, right, which is fine. However, they take on more of the role of what professionals should do themselves. So they're just like, come stay at my house. But that doesn't solve the problem. That just kind of puts a Band-Aid until the aggressor is now going for both of you.
Definitely. It's more like of a short-term solution. And just like how you said, well, now you're sort of in this ring of fire. Now maybe you're putting yourself in danger.
Right.
Or they're going to make sure, you know what, Jasmine helped out my spouse right here. I'm going to make sure to isolate her. You're not going to talk to Jasmine ever again.
Or they're going to hurt my dog.
There you go.
Oh, and they're going to want to know, who's that girl with all the tattoos?
Or my garden.
Because I don't know her name.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah.
Oh, don't bring the plants into this.
I know, plant mom. And
I'm going to go get a cauldron and pretend I'm a witch so they don't mess with them. Just kidding.
But, you know, like I said, we can laugh and joke about it, but it is a very serious thing. So we don't want you guys to think that we're making light of this, but it's easier to have the conversation when you can kind of like feel at ease and feel comfortable about it, but still bring that awareness to it. Yeah. So, you know, and I truly appreciate you coming on here and giving us a little more insight to what goes on during domestic violence, how that whole thing plays out. And like I said, it's not just October that we need to be talking about that, but it's all the time that we need to be making sure that people are aware. And because of that, so for the next 3 weeks, we will, on the podcast, we will be highlighting certain parts of domestic violence.
Awesome.
So you're kicking us off. So you kind of set the foundation for what we're going to talk about in the next 3 to 4 weeks as we are hopefully having people more aware outside of October, you know, because these will run past October. So, you know, thank you. And is there anything else that you would like to, that maybe we didn't touch on, that you would like people to know about domestic violence in general?
I mean, I think there's always more that we can talk to.
We could sit here all day.
Yes.
Y'all could give me an 8-hour slot and a little lunch here.
Bring in lunch. Hey, producers.
Yes. Yes.
But no, I think the biggest thing is if you feel like you need help, seek it. It is there. It is there, and it's not going to it's not like you're signing a contract to get into anything. You know, it always helps to get an outside perspective. I know we talked about utilizing family and friends, but, you know, sometimes we feel like they're biased or anything like that. So then call me, I promise, or call anyone else, and we'll share with you without bias.
Right.
Yeah.
Just call ACS and ask to speak to a victim advocate, and then they can, you know, come in and help in those situations. And, you know, as Jasmine mentioned, and I'm glad you just brought that up, but as Jasmine mentioned, we can have families and friends, but sometimes our families and friends want to take on the role of that professional, and sometimes we need to go see a professional to get someone who is truly knowledgeable about the situation, and not just like, okay, let me Google what's the best thing to do for you in this situation. Let's get the professionals involved and get them the help that they need.
Yes.
Definitely. No, but I say seek help and provide support always. As you know, even if we're doing good in life, always check in with your coworkers, family, friends, have those conversations, and just make sure that they're doing okay. And if they're not, help them get to where they need to.
Right. You know, valid point. Let's have a support system. If you don't have a support system, come on, let's find some people that we can depend on. Because even if we're not in a domestic violence situation, we do need support in general. But you never know when your situation is going to change.
I agree.
So,
and to add, at ACS, we are non-judgmental, because I feel like people think they're the only one in that situation. Not to take away from their situation, but they're just like, oh, my situation, nobody's going to understand. But it's like, you got, like, people here, so, you know, when they speak to a victim advocate or a FAP specialist, they hear those stories where they're not judgmental in the way, like, you did what? Like, that's not how we treat you. So just so to give people a peace of mind on that.
Definitely, I agree with what Jasmine said. I think everyone is FAP. You know, we're all fully trained.
Yeah.
And this is our job. This is our career. This is our passion. We're here to help you
Exactly.
and to empower you in some way.
Yes.
And so anything you tell us, we don't take it home with us to judge or anything like that. We truly just want to help you.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. So, before we end, one of the things we like to ask our guests is what brings you joy? So what brings you joy in working in the family advocacy program?
Without a doubt, what brings me joy is when I see somebody when I'm able, because we're not always able to see it, but when you are able to see someone transform, somebody who you might come in and maybe they're very meek and they're so scared and they don't know what's going to happen next, and a few months down the road, I mean, I can't even recognize them. They're doing their own thing. They don't even need me anymore. I love that.
It's like that gave me chills.
I love that.
They get their life back, right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
To have
And just to take back that power. I
Nice.
love to see somebody empowered.
Oh,
Yes.
that's, you know what? We're going to have to put that. I love to see someone empowered.
Yes.
I love
I was
that.
thinking, like, all these quotes. I'm
It's
just like, oh, my God.
okay, it's like we're going to steal that.
We need to bring a notepad next
Right.
time.
I know,
That's what we need.
Right.
but when we steal your idea, we will give you credit.
Yes. Yes.
So anyway, so again, thank you for joining us again today. With that being said, this is Getting to Know ACS with Tracy.
And Jasmine, don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell.
Bye.